and welcome to A Gamer's Guide to Productivity. I'm your host, of course, Nico Penguin, where we bridge the gap between gaming and productivity, helping you level up in every aspect of life. And today we have a guest who embodies resilience and the power of advocacy. We have Jacob Kendall, who is a global, and I'm not going to try to butcher this, but I don't know how to say this, gerontologist, as well as a versatile social worker and a two-time open heart surgery survivor who has been transforming other individuals through his personal journey into demystifying healthcare. So, whether you're here to learn about how to navigate the complex world of healthcare, or to be inspired by Jacob's story, or just listen in on some of the fun questions that we're going to be asking, you're in for a compelling episode. So, let's dive in. And thank you so much, Jacob, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. I'm happy to be here to I know we'll have a good conversation.
Oh, certainly. And just so that way everybody is aware, um, what kind of games, video games, do you play or do you have any experience with?
I'll be honest, I had to stop playing a lot of them after the N64 because I get motion sick. I did play a lot of GTA on the PlayStation when I was in the
Okay.
PhD program because I don't know if this is going to make me look bad or not, but it was a really good stress reliever.
Oh, no, that's exactly a great way to relieve stress, is just to hop on and do things you can't do in real life.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, no, that's actually pretty good. And so, with that, everyone, we see that, games aren't the end all be all, but how did you go from your journey? Like, what got you interested in trying to demystify healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned I think that I've had two open heart surgeries, and I have lifelong experience navigating our ridiculous healthcare system. I have complex medical needs, and push came to shove, and so I'm shoving back. And I also have debilitating back pain. I'm able to sit right now, but oftentimes I have a standing desk. I got to switch between standing, lying down, and sitting in various positions, which is why I'm kind of limited to doing remote work.
Mhm.
Um, I know we had tech issues with me originally setting up. I actually normally am good with tech. I have all the good stuff. I normally have a different office, but my wife and I both work from home, so I quickly made the switch to her office, and I was having a hard time hooking everything up. But anyway, having to work remotely. Obviously, when you have two heart surgeries like that, it changes your life. There's no way that
Right.
it's not going to. And I've also been a full time caregiver for a family member, and
Hmm.
my wife and I had to completely uproot our plans for all of that. None of this happens in a vacuum, and so that's kind of what I speak about is how none of these things happen in a vacuum. And I know that I'm not even remotely close to being the only one who has to deal with these issues. So I try to help other folks with this.
Wow, that's actually pretty interesting because, um, somebody may say that they're just going to go through this and they'll just, keep that information on the back burner for themselves. So what made you want to almost provide that de-stress relief to other individuals through this complicated system? Because in the USA, healthcare is really complicated to go through.
That's the nicest thing I can say about it. Uh, yeah, well, just to be clear, I'm because you asked about individuals, and I do help individuals, but the main thing I do is speaking to audiences.
Mm,
And the more that I went through it, I just got more and more frustrated, and I'm like, can I turn this into something that doesn't always have to make me miserable? That doesn't always have to make me angry and frustrated.
right.
And so, getting up and speaking about this and doing thought leadership on this because I do a lot on LinkedIn. I think that's where you and I got connected. And
Yes.
doing those things, it's like, that's kind of a way of turning my frustrations and trying to make it productive in some kind of way.
Hmm. And how do you believe that your experience with having open heart surgery, how that shaped your approach to healthcare?
Well, it was a combination of the good and the bad. I had two different surgeons for each one, and both of them are really, really good. My recovery experience was positive, and so that showed me like, wow, there are really some medical providers out there that they'll go to bat for you, and that's not the case with all
Right.
of them. And earlier in my life, it was easy for me to get mad at doctors because I thought that they were on the other side, not wanting to do good, but they're just as much victims of our medical industrial complex and the insurance companies as the patients are, and they get just as frustrated. And when you have a bad doctor, sometimes I think that usually just comes down to bad personality. So the good side is that, like, wow, I saw what it was like having a very good provider in the context of something where literally my life was on the line. But the
Hmm.
bad side of it is I had to go through so much crap. Um, and I usually don't use the word crap there. I forgot to ask you how you feel about colorful language on your podcast. I had to go through so much crap dealing with insurance companies, and it was maddening. It took months and months and months, and yeah, so that's my experiences in a nutshell. And then the actual personal side of things is now I'm on blood thinners, and I have to, uh, so I had to shift some of my life dreams. I would love to have gone skydiving. That would not be a good idea now. I used to
Mm.
love to ride roller coasters. I got to take a second thought with a lot of these things.
Right.
Uh, I, I I think that I will get back into doing world travel. But the very last trip I took was spending 5 weeks in rural Malawi doing research. And it was just a few months later that I had my second surgery. I would be risking things if I went
Right.
into a place where they don't have immediate health care. So, those are some things that come to mind when you ask that question about how it affected me.
Wow, that's actually pretty impactful that it essentially changed everything, perspective and activities, desires, things that you're wanting to do, can do, and allow yourself to do for the well-being. Now, I did want you to also clarify regarding the gerontologist, because somebody might listen and say, like, I
Yeah.
can't believe he skipped through that. He said it in the intro, but nobody explained what is this and why
Yeah.
did you get into that.
Yeah, so I just changed it actually, and I regularly change that term. You saw it probably a few days ago where it said theogerontologist. It now says meta gerontologist. Sometimes I'll do macro.
Mm,
Um, I'm thinking about trying omni and trans. So basically, people who are gerontologists and studying aging, they usually focus on one aspect of it, like caregiving or ageism or senior living or healthcare, chronic disease, or dying and death. But I like having a more broad view over all of those things.
hmm.
And so that's why I have meta gerontology now. The theo part of it is that I'm studying theology right now. They can't keep me out of the
Oh,
classroom. I have way too much education. And I think that there's some interesting questions around faith and spirituality and religious beliefs that come up at the end of life. Of
right,
course, most people die in older age, right? And so there's a lot of
right.
intersection between dying and death and studying aging. And so I kind of wanted to add that feather to my cap of being able to have those kinds of conversations and add that to my armamentarium, if you will. So the theogerontologist is the intersection of theology and gerontology.
And what was the gerontology part?
Studying aging, that's where you focus on aging.
Also, like ageism, like the older generation, or how you advance in age, or how to prevent aging, or
Yeah,
all of that.
a lot of gerontologists do focus on the older population. I see aging as a lifespan thing, as in as soon as you're born, you start aging.
Right,
And even in the womb, I don't know if you ever heard of adverse childhood experiences, but as a young child or even in the womb, if your mother smokes, or if your parents fight a lot, or if one of your parents experiences abuse or whatever, as an infant, that gives you a higher likelihood of having chronic disease 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. And so I really
wow,
I really see aging as being a lifespan thing. And
wow,
I really like to speak to college students and young professionals about preparing better for these things that they're eventually going to have to deal with, whether it's their
right,
own health situations or the decline of a parent that they have to do caregiving for. I think that everyone, as soon as they hit that milestone of becoming an adult, or when you get married or whatever, you need to get life insurance. You need to start talking about power of attorney. You need to start having those conversations about end of life, and how are we going to care for our parents and things like that. So yes, you are right that a lot of people who are gerontologists focus specifically on older adults. I'm trying to start a little bit earlier than that, so that these younger generations can do a better job at aging than we've been doing so far. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, that makes 100% sense. Now, how would you reconcile the conflicting perspective, if you have, of like medical science and holistic health practices? Um, so how would you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I used to be one of those who was all science, and everything else is just kind of full of crap. I have thankfully more recently gotten, I'm personally interested, very amateur interest in quantum mechanics. And I think once you get into stuff like that, it really opens you up to realize that I don't know. There's some things that empirical science don't necessarily, they can't put their fingers on. So I'm more open to holistic health and things like that, and thinking outside the box. And I appreciate, um, I'm sure there's some folks on who listen to this who watch Ted Lasso, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire series. It's one of the last episodes in the first season where he's playing darts in a bar, and he quotes Walt Whitman, and the quote is, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I prefer when my medical providers are curious rather than judgmental. And so if I tell them, "Hey, I've been getting dry needling," which is the same thing as acupuncture, or this or that, and they don't just automatically shoot me down, then that's a better
Mm.
relationship, right? So I'm not looking for just me to be open to those things. I think we should be, let's put everything on the table and discuss it, right? So I think that we need a more comprehensive, holistic approach to health. Does that answer your question?
Oh no, it does tremendously. And then in regards to that, for those that may be listening, like what would you say when they hear life insurance and they think, oh, that's for old people, power of attorney, or no, that's like, that's when I'm 70. Right now I'm only 15, 20,
Yeah.
25. Like I don't really need any of that right now. Like what do you say to those individuals, like, that's not for me?
Yeah, and you're right. So as a business person, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. I can sit here and I can know exactly what my particular audience needs, and I know that my audience needs to hear prepare for these things in advance. But as a business person, if your audience doesn't know that they need those things, you're going to have a hard time selling it. So I'm still trying to navigate that. What I would tell them is, if they hear me or someone say, "Hey, you need to be thinking about these things. You need to go get life insurance, et cetera," and then they have, inevitably they have the kind of response that you just said, I would tell them a few things. One, go talk to your grandparents and ask them what they felt about that, because right now the people who are currently grandparents, people, baby boomers and whatnot,
Hmm.
are, many of them should feel that regret for not having better prepared for these things.
Mm.
They should feel that, and hopefully they're willing to be honest. My grandfather, he's in his mid 90s, and he straight up has said before, "Jacob, I didn't plan for these things because frankly I didn't think I'd be living this long." You know what? The younger people who are in their 50s and 20s, I mean, the teens and 20s and 30s, they will be living that long.
Right.
And so the data back that up. Go talk to some older adults and ask, how they feel about those things. And overall, this is not just an individual level issue. I think societally, we should be more open to embracing our own mortality. I
Mhm.
fully believe, I'm convicted that the more we embrace our own mortality, the more we increase our quality and quantity of life. I know it seems counterintuitive, but I fully
Right.
believe that. And so it's not just an individual issue. I don't think that we live in a society that encourages us to have these conversations. It's why I'm so open about my own healthcare. It's why I'm so open about these issues, because I want to normalize them. We
Right.
live in a death avoidance society, and Americans, we're terrible at planning in advance. We're just really, really bad at it. So, those are a few things that I would respond with.
And then so that's one part. I'm gonna go down another layer.
All right.
So what about those individuals that say, I understand, but the value that I'm getting is not anything that I'm benefiting at this point in time. AKA, like somebody might be saying, like, well, I got quoted, they said it's $27 a month for the amount that I'm trying to get. But then if I die, it's like I'm not gonna see that money. So I'm putting that to who? My future legacy, or my spouse. Like, what about to those individuals that might be a little stingy, or might say like, well, what's the whole point of getting that? Because then I'm paying into something that I never get a benefit from.
Have you heard people respond that way?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Fair. I just want to make sure those are the
That's why I
realistic.
want to get your info, so that way I know
All
what
right.
to say to try to convince them.
Okay. All right. A couple things come to mind. I would wonder why these people are getting married and having children if that's the way that they feel. I mean, I'm just being honest. Like,
Mm,
you got to have some kind of concern there if you're bothering to bring other people into your life who are presumably the most important people in your life. Like, well,
right.
reflect on that. That's an important conversation. Obviously, if you're not married and you don't have children, maybe that's a different conversation. At the end of the day, it's really, 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 really tough to convince people to prepare for future crises,
Mm,
even when you give them bald evidence. So another thing
right.
that comes to mind is I don't have the numbers on this, but we seem to have this trajectory of a lot of people, and for the most part, I like where this is headed. I was a former professor, and I left higher ed because I don't like the meritocratic elitism that
Mm,
characterizes higher ed. I don't buy into this idea of you got to go get a university degree in order to be successful. And I think people are pushing back on that, and they're replacing it with trade skills, which is great,
hmm.
or they're replacing it with an entrepreneurial endeavor, which I also
Right.
think is great. And so honestly, when you think about it in terms like that, and unless you have a really banging job, if you know how to take advantage, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you know how to run a business, or you know how to invest well, in most cases, if you do things that are going to bring you wealth right now, those same things are going to set you up to have wealth when you're retired, or to be able to handle those issues then
Right.
anyway. So, that's what I would say. Make good decisions for yourselves right now, and that's going to help you in the future. That's not a perfect answer, but that is definitely something that comes to mind. Does that make sense?
Oh no, that certainly does make sense. And then, how would you say that you approach the concept of like self advocacy for individuals to go through the process of healthcare, especially those that may feel powerless or overwhelmed? They're not good at reading the fine print, and they want to try to do it by themselves.
Yeah, where self advocacy comes up the most for me in my conversations is the interactions that individuals and their families or their caregivers have with the medical system, especially physicians. I can't tell you the
Mm,
number of times that I have related a story about a recent visit to a doctor that I had, like to my mom, who also has complex medical needs, or to a friend or someone else. I can't tell you the number of times that I do that, and they respond with like, "You said that to to the doctor." I'm like, "Yeah, you're damn right I did." Like, be assertive, don't be aggressive. But
right,
if
right,
there's something that you need, if you know that you need something, if you have a question, then be willing to ask it. I think a lot of people, I say assertiveness, and a lot of people interpret that as being confrontational. No, I didn't say aggressive. I said assertive. Assertive is that sweet spot. So be willing to advocate for yourself, and this is a skill that a lot of people just, it doesn't come naturally. It comes naturally to me. I used to be on the aggressive side, and I had to tone it back, but a lot of people were more on the passive side, and they had to tone it up, dial it up. But self advocacy is a skill. And so, what I'll often tell people is, okay, you have these 10 different questions that you want to ask your doctor, but it just makes you sweat bullets to think about saying these things to your physician. You know what? The next time you go in, ask one of them. And the next time you go in after that, ask two of them. The next time, ask three of them. And apply this concept of assertiveness and self advocacy in all the interactions that you have, not just with the medical system, with all the different needs that you have, right? So that's where self-advocacy comes up the most for me. And when it comes to caregivers, there's an additional piece. Um, Caregivers have, I'll say this as a way of illustrating the impacts of caregiving. People who are informal caregivers for a loved one, like in their own home, have a
Hmm.
higher morbidity, like a higher chance of getting chronic disease, and a lower life expectancy compared to people who are not caregivers and they're the same age. That's how much of an impact caregiving has on you. It just absolutely wears you out. And so I will say,
Wow.
I will say, I know it's mind blowing, and this is gonna, it's only gonna get worse, so to speak. And so we really need to address this now. And so I'll tell caregivers, like, if you need a break, then you have to think about your own well-being. Don't
Right.
bury yourself into the ground caring for this person that you love, because you're not going to be any good to them if you then get sick. There's a reason that they tell you on an airplane to put on your own oxygen mask first before you
Right.
help anyone else. So I kind of frame it in those terms.
Wow. That's actually wow. I didn't know that by I would say being around or trying to assist on a constant basis, that it's like that increases your risk of also passing away sooner, essentially. Or wow, that's pretty impactful.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, in your experience, what would you say are some of like the big misconceptions that patients may have or potential patients may have about the healthcare system? And what do you think are ways that we can start addressing them?
Well, we live in an extremely, and I would say exaggeratedly, overly individualistic society. I think American individualism has gone too far. So, a really relevant example where this comes to play in terms of healthcare is, and I'm not trying to get political, but we are in an election year, so it's hard not to.
Hmm.
Whenever someone says that they don't want some form of nationalized or socialized medicine, it's because they say that they don't want to lose the ability to choose their own provider. What I want to say to them is, first of all, there's no way you have complex medical needs and you're saying that, because you would have a very different experience and perspective. And the other thing is, the whole idea of being able to choose your provider is an illusion, because that doesn't actually exist. They just want you to think that it exists. And so I think that there is this notion that so much about our health comes down to individual level decisions, but there's so much of it that doesn't either. These are systemic level factors. The decisions that local, state, and national politicians make, those matter. Where you live matters greatly. I live in the Southeast, and this is the stroke belt. For various reasons, we have
Mm,
much higher prevalence of stroke, diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. It's actually called the stroke belt. So geography matters.
wow.
Whether you live in urban or rural areas matter. And if you go through life thinking that everything about your health boils down to your own individual level decisions, then you're just going to miss a whole lot. You're going to miss a whole lot. And so I would just encourage people to be willing to take other perspectives and view health through those lenses.
Wow. So that's actually pretty big, in terms of the perspective that you can draw upon if you're not closed off, literally, because there are individuals that are closed off to that. And you did mention that sometimes individuals are making decisions because they want to stay with the same provider, um, and they want to make sure that they're choosing that provider. That's a very true concept, because with certain affiliations you do have limited choice. I do know, like, when you go to a new job, there's sometimes like their healthcare that they have offering there, that might have one or two different options, and you're limited in what you can choose. And sometimes you have the same PCP, the primary care physician, for a long time, but because in this new employment they have a totally different network, now you can no longer visit this doctor, and you got to start the whole process over, sign releases, get the paperwork transferred over, and then start the whole process all over again. And I do show here that you mentioned that you're essentially trying to help individuals not have to make it so complicated. So for individuals that may be thinking about job hopping, and those benefits might not be the same from one job to the other, what would be some ways that they can make it an easier transition for them doing so?
Yeah, I mean, definitely understand what the benefits are if you're applying for a new job, or if you're going to stay where you are. Make sure you understand those benefits, and then milk them for all that they're worth. My wife works for an organization where not only do we have health insurance through that, but we also have teledoc, and it doesn't cost anything
Mm,
extra. And a lot of problems we can solve just by calling them.
mm,
And there's also EAP, employee assistance, where when my dad was debilitated by a stroke and we had to give him full-time caregiving, I was able to use this resource because I'm my wife's spouse, and like, hey, this is what's going on. What can you offer me? And they took about a week and they looked up a whole bunch of information and sent that to me. And a lot of employers have things like that.
right.
They may be buried in the language or whatever. And it's not just employers and what they have. Like, tap into your social networks. I'm a member of a few different Facebook groups, for example. Like, one of them is other people who've had my a valve replacement surgery and who are also on
Mm.
blood thinners. And I've learned so much from being in that group. And I've also been able to share my insights. So, just tap into all the different resources that you have, whether they be formal, like insurance or whatever benefits you have through employment, or whether they be informal, like your various social support systems. Um, and I don't know that I can make it all less complicated, but I can definitely give some strategies for squeezing more juice out of it.
And I do want to give you the opportunity to let everyone know what you offer, because if you go to the webpage, you do have some offerings there. Somebody that might be listening in and heard what you have to say might want to have a discussion. So, what would you say are the things that they can do with you?
Is this the last question you're asking me?
Oh no, no, I just like to give the
Okay.
opportunity where you can leverage everything that you have to offer.
I did want to say a couple more things about gaming because I know that this is your audience. But to answer your question now, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I see, and my website are both scrolling across the bottom there.
Yeah.
I post a lot of content on LinkedIn, Jacob Evans Kendall, and a lot of it is about these issues. And then my website is what I do is speaking, and I go speak at universities, churches. I'm trying to go speak in corporate sector because they pay really well, but it's harder to break into that. So
Hmm.
definitely, if anyone is works for an organization, they know that they could benefit from me from having someone come and talk about these things, and that's where they would go learn about me, is on LinkedIn and my website, jacobevanskindle.com. Thank you for asking.
Oh no, perfect, perfect. I just have to do that small little commercial break so that way you
Yeah.
can get that. And then now we're back to the groove. I do have like three, four more serious level questions. Then I get some of the fun stuff.
All
Um,
right.
what would you say your concept of? I read four-dimensional polythinking. How does this influence your approach to problem solving?
I'm trying to get better and better at answering that question within a few minutes, but I haven't got there yet. So I'm probably not going to be able to adequately answer it. Four-dimensional thinking comes from the concept of space-time. There are three dimensions of space and one dimension of time. And so when we think about health, the phrase that I use to kind of illustrate that is, health is more than individualistic medical here and now. Okay. So it's more than individualistic. I've already kind of talked about that. There are
Hmm.
systemic issues. We got to be able to zoom out and see what's going on at the population level. And I think we can zoom in as well and see what's going on at the cellular level. There's even a thing now called quantum medicine, but I won't digress. And then health is more than medical, as in your doctors don't know everything, and you
Right.
need other perspectives about this. And that's where your question about holistic medicine comes in. And then the third dimension is not just here. All right.
Mm.
I already mentioned the stroke belt, for example.
Right.
Health is different in different geographic areas. I'm
Hmm.
very concerned about healthcare access and moving into the future here where I live. I live in one of the fastest growing counties in the country, and we just had a water shortage a couple weeks ago, and that kind of thing happens regularly because too many people are moving here. And I've
Right.
asked my doctor straight up, like, listen, I got to be able to have emergency care if and when I need it. And all these people are moving here. Should I be concerned about this? And I've told my wife, listen, we need a few backup cities in case we need to move for healthcare access. So it's not
Right.
just here, and it's not just now. And that's where the life insurance comes in.
Hmm.
Don't just think about what's going on right now. You're going to have to deal with these issues in the future, so prepare for it. Those are the 4 dimensions in a nutshell. I hope that's at least somewhat clear. I'm not great yet at doing it in a few minutes, but I tried.
Oh no, that is really, really, really good. And so starting to divert slightly a bit towards the fun stuff. So, how would you say that you are able to balance the personal work that you have in healthcare with your desire to speak in front of audiences, as well as some of your personal pursuits? Like I think I read bird watching, piano. How you're able to balance all these activities?
Well, I'm still learning to do it, right? I Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert at it yet, but I'll say a few things. First of all personal things that I can say about my own history of caregiving and health and my heart surgeries, that feeds into what I do professionally. If I didn't have those experiences, then anything that I have to say about it would be less compelling. Like
Hmm.
I've done that. I've been there. And whenever I tell people I've had 2 open heart surgeries, they're like, whoa, that rarely ever do I get the reaction of, oh, I don't care about this topic. Let's just move on. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I can relate to people because of the personal. So that feeds into it for sure. And of
Hmm.
course, it works the other way around as well. Uh, you know, I have to be very disciplined with my time. It can be easy as a business owner when you make your own schedule to not make it as organized as it should be. Like I said, I'm working on that, but also like not to overwork myself. I need to go outside and look at some birds. I need to make sure I'm exercising. I need to make sure that I don't just work from sun up to sundown. So doing hobbies and having those interests is a part of my health, and I would encourage everyone to have some kind of hobby like. And I'm sure I'm guessing a lot of your audience. I don't know. I don't know if they do gaming professionally or as a hobby, but I can see it being valuable either way.
Oh no, certainly, because when you're in front of the keyboard for more than 2 hours at a time, you need to get up, walk
Yeah,
around, stretch, get some sunlight, get some vitamin D, because when you're sitting there just looking at the blue screen, it's just not healthy for the overconsumption, and then
yeah. I mean,
you
we
having
have
to
we
go to
have
the ER.
yeah we have higher rates of back pain, arthritis, and obesity, and those things are occurring at younger and younger ages because people
Hmm.
are spending more time in front of a screen, and that's not just with gaming. That's writing stuff for like assignments for schools. That's people doing
Right.
remote work. We did not evolve to sit at a desk. We evolved to run out in fields. And we still live in those bodies. So absolutely, I think everyone should go take a 10-minute walk. Can you imagine what kind of society we would live in if everyone just walked for no less than 10 minutes every single day? My goodness.
You might win the Nobel Peace Prize, just for that. That's a very true statement. Everybody
Yeah.
would be a little bit healthier, less crankier, with much more, in their tank of emotion. Now, I do want to ask you, if younger you heard yourself, um, try to explain why it's important to get an understanding of the healthcare system. The earlier, the better. What do you think would have been the words that would have conveyed that sensation about how dire and important it is? And also, what would have made you actually start to pay attention a little bit sooner?
Well, I don't know. I'll say what's honest for me, and this may be a point of departure for a lot of people, but so I've had my aortic valve replaced twice, and that's because we have a congenital issue in my mom's side of the family, and I've known that since age. They discovered it at age 3, and I've had to go see a cardiologist and get an echocardiogram at least once a year ever since then, and so I always knew that possibility of needing this to be replaced someday existed. And so if
Mm,
someone came from on high, came down and said, "Hey, Jacob, in your late 20s, you're going to have your first surgery," it would not surprise me at all. When we talk about chronic disease on a larger scale,
mhm.
most of that is preventable. Mine's not preventable, it's congenital, but most people's chronic disease is preventable. Um, I think the fact that runs in my mom's side of the family and that I myself have had that condition makes me more aware that these are real issues because I didn't know that I would have back problems. I knew that I had the heart issue, I didn't know
Hmm.
that I would have back problems. I didn't know that I would have all these other things going on. But I think being aware of that makes it more realistic. And I would just, in the same way that I said earlier about, go talk to your grandparents, go talk to people who have chronic conditions or who have been a caregiver, and just have honest conversations with them, asking them about those experiences. I think that everyone should have at least one friend that is one close friend that is an older adult that's not a family member, and, all the wisdom that you can take from them. But all that being said, as much as I can sit here and say that I had some kind of priming because I already had this condition and I knew about it, I was still a dumbass like everyone else in younger age. um, so what would have gotten through is, I guess, going to tell me to go have, like I just said, going to have, I don't know, this is tough, and going to have honest conversations with family members, you
Mm.
know, and that's a tough one. That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that too much. And this is, I'm glad that you asked the question, because I have to remind myself every so often that I'm talking to a lot of people who have not had my experiences,
Right.
and I need to be able to meet them where they are. So your question right there reminded me that I need to keep working on that.
That's okay. I can ask another question. So I did want to know, because you mentioned it briefly and it just ignited like a gazillion and one different variations of this question. So you mentioned conditions that are essentially genetically passed through. How would you say, because you mentioned, once you're an adult, it's important to start understanding these things. So for, my audience that some of them are thinking about, dating and marriage, and they're thinking about having a legacy. They're thinking about having children. How important is it to you to discuss, up front, like, hey, this is what my family suffers. This is what we go through. I have an aunt or an uncle that has this and this and that. And so I just want to be upfront with you, like, this, or my mom and dad, they have this. I don't have it now, but I could pass it on. And if she they confirmed that information, that on their end, same thing, that you're being cognizant. How important do you think that conversation is, especially after you mentioned being an adult and needing to have those adult conversations?
That is a really pinpoint question that I've never been asked before, but I really like it. So, from the perspective of someone like me who does have a condition, not everything is testable, by the way. As far as I know, they have not found the genetic basis for my
Mm.
particular condition. They have for Alzheimer's, the ApoE4, and then for breast cancer, BRCA3 or whatever it is. So they have
Wow.
found the genetic indicators for certain conditions, and you can get
Hmm.
tested for those. You can do genetic testing. Um, I
Wow,
think from the
I did not know
perspective
that.
of
That's pretty
someone,
cool.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that the when it comes to genes and genetic testing and gene therapy, it's advancing pretty rapidly. Um,
Mm.
that I think that's, yeah, there's gonna be some interesting stuff moving forward. So from the perspective of someone who does have some of that genetic history
Hmm.
in their family, I would say, in an early in a relationship, when it looks like something's going to be serious, say, hey, listen, I'm happy to be, I'm very willing to be open about my family's medical history if and when you want to hear about that and have that conversation. And then you've kind of set the path for that. And from the perspective of someone else, and you're receiving that information, I would say a couple of things. First of all, there really isn't anyone out there that doesn't have a history of something in their family. There's just no one who's completely unaffected by it. So and
Mm.
I ask people, this is one of my favorite questions to ask my undergraduate students. What kind of medical history do you have? If you know someone who died from cancer or heart disease or whatever, and I occasionally would get some no's, and my response every time is, well, that's just because you didn't know about it. So anyone
Mm.
who is receiving that information, be open to the fact that you're not immune to it. And one of the things that I do as a part of my advocacy or whatever is, with DEI and social justice and things like that, a lot of those are focused on disability and race and immigration status and LGBTQ plus issues. And that's great. Those are important issues. But I think we also need to include chronic disease in those groups of people who are vulnerable in some kind of way. And so, for anyone who has the opportunity to engage in a discussion about someone personally having chronic disease, I would ask them to keep in mind that how would you have this conversation with someone if they had a developmental disability, or if it
Mm,
was an issue related to race or LGBT or whatever. That's the way you should apply the same level of empathy and compassion when it comes to chronic disease,
mm,
right? That's what I
right.
would say to them. If I'm not making sense, let me know. But that's what I would say is be open to having those conversations. Yeah.
No, no, that's certainly because when you're thinking about getting together, as you mentioned, nobody has essentially like a perfect family where there's no medical conditions whatsoever. So at some point you can trace it back. Somebody had something, and because there's some individuals that just they're not aware, and if the doctor provides a diagnosis that your child may be coming down with this and that, it's like some people get shocked, like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And you can have that conversation, or at least be open to receiving that conversation. Now, I did also want to ask you, now that we're on that topic, um well, actually, the fun stuff, I wanted to ask you about the fun stuff, was you mentioned earlier a couple of games that you were into, and so I just want to make sure that you lay it out for the record. Your five most favorite or most played video games of all time, the ones that either you spent the most time playing or the ones that you absolutely had the most fun playing, whichever one, the top five.
Yeah, well, I'm very old school. I'm not going to argue about that or deny that. Mario Kart is definitely tops, and I would go all the way back to the very original. You can't beat that. But yeah, I played it on every Nintendo system since then as well. That
Same,
is one of the
same.
Yeah, awesome. That is one of the games that makes me less motion sick. I loved playing Zelda Ocarina of Time, but I could only play
Oh.
for so long a period because I mean I would throw up if I played for too long. And I loved GoldenEye, so those were all in the N64.
Oh, I liked all three of those too.
Yeah, yeah. And then I mentioned that I played GTA. I think it was GTA 4 or 5 when I was in grad
Mm,
school. It was my roommate's PlayStation in game, and he had codes to where I could just basically have unlimited ammo and call off
yeah,
I was
yeah,
and call off the police, and I wasn't doing any kind of mission. I just really needed to blow off steam. And
yeah.
I don't know what opinions people might have about the fact that that's the way that I did it, but whatever. I had to grad school was tough.
Facts.
um the kinds of games that I can play now and be okay with are sports games. I'm interested.
Mm,
I would love to be able to play the NCAA football game is finally back in the works now.
right.
Now the NIL and everything. I'm a huge college football fan, so I would love to get my hands on that in some way. But my brother and I love playing FIFA soccer.
Hey,
So those are some
nice.
of my favorite ones. Yeah,
And so, what would you say was the one that you dived the most hours in?
I spent a lot of time playing Zelda.
The Zelda one.
Yeah.
So have you ever played like Super Smash Bros?
Oh, I've played Super Smash Brothers all throughout college. I was not very good. I was always played as Samus. Um,
Ah, okay. A Samus main. Okay.
yeah, but I was never that good. I just thought it was fun.
Have you ever also played the Super Mario game on the 64?
Yes, uh-huh.
All right. So the mechanics for me personally, I see that the Super Mario and the Zelda, I see the mechanics as overly simple and
Yeah,
very copy and pasty, but the
yeah,
storyline is just completely different. The
yeah,
like for example, like having to play the flute versus like having to do puzzle pieces in Super Mario, it's so
yeah,
complex. I also wanted to gather your input on since you do have a wide variety of different games, from the RPG storyline to sports. I didn't hear anything about first person shooters or anything like that. Is there a particular reason that you don't go that way? Because for me, I am bad at first person shooters, so I don't even try to play any of the new ones.
What was GoldenEye first person shooter?
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah, GoldenEye was. It was one of the. Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
that
But
one made me I could do it in bunches because it made me motion sick, and that's why the better that the graphics get with those kinds of games, the less well I can handle them. But my favorite with
mm,
GoldenEye was just playing like battle. Multiple people would be in,
see, I
this
can't do
board, and
well against other people. Like that's
uh,
why I didn't even count it. That's why I didn't even count it because I hated doing the multiplayer where you're on the split screen and then
yeah,
whoever had the like it was like whoever was a quick draw essentially
yeah.
whoever could like figure out the reticle essentially and I had such a terrible time with the 64 controller. Oh, but that's actually
I
pretty
never
cool.
wanted to go through the mission. I mean, I did it with GoldenEye, and of course with Zelda. And you bring up an interesting point with Zelda. I'm a musician, and I think that the soundtrack is really good. That the songs that you had to
Loved it.
learn on the ocarina were, I think that they were simple, but they it was good. So I'm glad you mentioned that point. Yeah,
Oh no, certainly, and because I love the concept of gamification and understanding that if you can learn how to, play a little bit on the game, then it can translate to you can play a little bit in real life. Maybe not
yeah,
as well, and it doesn't transition, but now with virtual reality, with now like mixed
yeah,
virtual reality headsets, augmented reality, now there's this newer generation, this
yeah.
newer way of learning where now you can actually watch somebody playing right there and then you just play alongside with whatever instrument that you have. And I also wanted to get your input as well, because the healthcare system is advancing, gaming is advancing, and now there's the rise of AI. And now, you have customer service bots that are AI generated, meaning that it takes your privacy, your information, your data, your messaging in order to fine tune and teach itself how to respond accordingly. And I wanted to get your input on this.
Yeah, let me string a few different points together because, in my opinion, all of these things are related. So hopefully, this won't get too convoluted. Do we have a time constraint here?
You can go for it.
All right, I got to get off here soon, but
Oh, if you
for
need to
dinner.
go, just let me
But but
know.
but but no, let me address this question. So I would have I wouldn't like friendly arguments with my roommate, the same one who had the PlayStation and GTA
Hmm.
in grad school, because he loved I think it was Final Fantasy, and I would like go by his room and see him staring at the screen. I'm like, I thought you were playing a game. He's like, I am. I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm like, well, I didn't know that was a part of it. And I used to think that there was not this beneficial aspect of games, that it was just a waste, but he argued me down on that. He said, you know what, this is like it's basically a book with that kind of game. It's a story, and it has the characters, and you're following that along. And I've come around to realize, you know what, there are multiple ways of learning things. I love reading
Mm,
personally. My wife listens to a lot of podcasts and watches a ton of documentaries. I don't enjoy doing either of those, but I both of those are legitimate ways of learning. And so, I've come to respect these other modes of learning, even though I don't appreciate them myself, like documentaries, for example. And so, I think the same can be true of gaming. I know no one who's listening to this needs to be convinced. So I'm just confessing that I used to think that. But to connect it to your other points, I think the way that we process information, the way that we learn new things and learn about the world, and the way that we interact with the world is changing rapidly. And so
mhm,
virtual reality, AI are absolutely going to play a central foundational role, in my opinion, with those things. I know that Apple was not the first to do it, but those recent ones that came out with those, I forget what they're called, but it's the goggles or the glasses you can wear or whatever,
the
and the
meta
same thing that
glasses.
you would see on your computer screen, you're seeing them here. And I think we're headed to a place where more and more people are going to be wearing those. And it's going to, I don't know the best way to say this, but in the same way, like my son, he's almost 2 years old, and he's constantly wanting to grab glasses off my face. And I tell him, no, don't grab glasses off people's faces. That's a part of
Hmm.
their body. Like
Right.
I consider that a part of my body. I think we're going to increasingly be able to say that about AI and related things moving forward. At some point, there is going to be a court case in which we have an ethical argument, and AI is one of the defendants or whatever in the case. That's going to happen at some point. I think it's going to come. And so when you think about gaming, when you think about technology, when you think about VR and AI, and I would throw neuroscience into that, I don't know exactly what the future is going to look like, but it's going to involve some amazing advancements in all of those areas. Does that make sense? I'm hoping I'm
Certainly.
not. Yeah. Okay.
No, certainly, and I want to keep talking, but as mentioned, time is a miss, and I did want to close before before I read this outro here, that the fact that not only is science going to and technology going to continue to advance, but there's also the neural implants, the brain
Yep.
implants that are in the
Exactly.
works as well. And so when you mentioned the court case, all I kept thinking was, yeah, there's going to be a lot of court cases about that as well.
Oh yeah, for
um,
sure.
uh,
Absolutely.
so, so that wraps up another episode of A Gamer's Guide to Productivity. I hope you, the listener today, found this conversation as much of a joy as I did with Jacob Kendall. It was very enlightening, inspiring, and I truly, truly liked it. If you guys liked it, make sure to drop a like and a comment and subscribe for any future interviews as such. And remember that mastering productivity isn't just about getting more done. It's about making sure that you do what matters most to you. So if you enjoyed it today, truly make sure to look at everything that's in the description. Make sure to reach out to Jacob if you like what he had to say. And you are somebody that makes the decision about who gets to come in and do a conversation or a teleconversation. As you heard, that he has the capacity and the willingness to do that. So make sure to let us know what you thought about in the comments below. Until next time, keep leveling up in your life, one game at a time.